Good evening. You're watching ARIRANG News at 8. It's Monday, February 10th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I am Yoo Ji-hye. We begin this evening with extreme weather conditions on the nation's east coast. The record amounts of snowfall have inundated the region over the past few days. And for more, we connect live to our Kim Bo-gyung at the Weather Center. Now, Bo-gyung, what's the latest?
Well, Ji-hye, from February 6th through today, Jinburyeong Mountain in Gangwon-do province recorded 122 centimeters of snow, which is a record. In fact, today, 166 schools in the province canceled classes, and about $550,000, that is, worth of property damage has been reported already. Now, the Gangwon-do and Gyeongsangbuk-do provinces, as well as the cities of Ulsan and Jeju, are under heavy snowfall advisories. Plus, a strong wind watch has been issued in Gangwon-do, making it cold and snowy. As a result, transportation has been cut off in the mountainous regions of Gangneung and Sokcho, and more snow is to come. Up to 15 centimeters of snow will fall on the mountains of Gangwon and Jeju. So if you're in those regions, please be careful and please watch out for more snow. Also, another blast of snow is on its way in those regions from this Thursday through Saturday. Back to you, Ji-hye.
All right, Bo-gyung, we'll get back to you soon for an update near the end of our newscast. In other news, former U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Donald Gregg arrived in North Korea on Monday in a surprise visit to possibly secure the release of a Korean-American detained there. According to Associated Press Television News, Gregg is leading a four-member non-governmental delegation in Pyongyang. Although the reason for his visit has not been disclosed, experts believe Gregg may be in the north to win the release of Kenneth Bae, who has been held for over a year after being sentenced to 15 years of hard labor on charges of crimes against the state. U.S. Human Rights Envoy Robert King was initially scheduled to visit Pyongyang this week to negotiate Bae's release, but the North pulled back its invitation, citing the upcoming joint military drills between Seoul and Washington. And speaking of that, military exercises between South Korea and the United States, the dates are set. The two sides are to kick off the joint exercises in late February as planned, a move that could affect upcoming cross-border family reunions. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee has this report.
South Korea and the United States will begin their annual joint military drills in the last week of February, a plan that could jeopardize an earlier inter-Korean agreement to resume long-suspended reunions for families separated by the Korean War.
The ROK U.S. Combined Forces Command will hold the Key Resolve exercises, an annual defense training drill, from February 24th to March 6th. We also plan to hold the Foal Eagle exercises, which also take place every year, from February 24th to April 18th.
The dates coincide with the upcoming family reunions, scheduled for February 20th to the 25th at North Korea's Mount Kumgang Resort. The Defense Ministry said Pyongyang was informed of the dates on Sunday, but has not yet reacted to the plans. North Korea has, however, previously threatened to scrap the reunions should the South go ahead with the military exercises.
We're clearly stating that dialogue and invasive war games can never coexist, nor can reconciliation and conflict.
South Korea's Unification Ministry reiterated Monday the drills, involving tens of thousands of troops, are defensive in nature and should not disrupt plans for family reunions.
We have repeatedly explained that the Key Resolve exercises are annual defense training drills that will be conducted separately from the family reunion event. The South Korean government thinks the reunions must take place as planned, no matter what.
Millions of Koreans were separated from their families during the Korean War more than 6 decades ago, and some 70,000 South Koreans, most of whom are now in their 80s, are on a waiting list to see their loved ones one last time. Amid the uncertainty, South Korea has been preparing for the reunion event since last week. The Unification Ministry said that although Mount Kumgang saw over 1 meter of snow over the weekend, snowplows sent by South Korea have already removed most of the snow that's accumulated at the prospective reunion site. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is scheduled to be in Seoul this week to discuss the inter-Korean situation and pending bilateral issues. Seoul's Foreign Ministry said Monday that Kerry will spend the first 2 days of his 6-day trip to Asia and the Middle East that starts Thursday here in South Korea. He is expected to meet with Seoul's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se and discuss ways to expand their cooperation on regional issues, mainly their dealings with North Korea. This is Kerry's 5th trip to Asia in the past year and his first to South Korea in 10 months. Meanwhile, up in the north, it appears as though the rogue state is ready to conduct a 4th nuclear test. Now, during the interpellation session at the National Assembly on Monday, South Korean Defense Minister Kim Bo-gyung told lawmakers that preparation for a test at North Korea's main underground nuclear sites in Punggye-ri appear to be complete. The site was used for the regime's 3rd nuclear test last year. Kim also noted that the North is in the early stages of preparing for a long-range missile launch at its northwest test site in Dongchangri. He assured that the South Korean military is keeping a close watch on movements there. Here's more from that interpellation session at the National Assembly. Reunification of the Korean Peninsula took center stage, a topic of hot debate that surfaced in recent weeks, especially after President Park Geun-hye openly campaigned on its eventual benefits earlier this year. Kim Hyun-ji has more.
On Monday, lawmakers questioned members of President Park Geun-hye's cabinet about the government's reunification policy. Just 1 month after the president said a unified Korea would be like hitting the jackpot. Ruling party lawmakers expressed support for the president's efforts, including her vision to create a peace park in the demilitarized zone.
I propose setting up a joint committee to establish a World Peace Park in the DMZ, made up of the 2 Koreas and the United Nations. This way, the project will engender cooperation from the international community.
While welcoming this idea and others, including making reunions of separated families more regular, Unification Minister Yoo Il-jae said inter-Korean relations must first improve. Some lawmakers expressed concern that the president's recent rhetoric suggests that Seoul supports a reunification scenario in which the South would absorb the North following an abrupt collapse. But Prime Minister Chung Eun-won said the Park administration does not support reunification by absorption, but rather one that is gradual and based on improved inter-Korean relations. At the hearing, the Democratic Party expressed opposition to the ruling party's North Korea human rights bill, arguing it supports civic groups that routinely send anti-North Korea leaflets.
If the bill is approved, North Korea human rights groups will get funding from the South Korean government. This raises fears that anti-North Korea groups will abuse the money taken from the state coffers.
To further thaw inter-Korean relations, opposition lawmakers demanded the government lift economic sanctions against Pyongyang that were put in place after the North's sinking of the South Korean warship Cheonan in 2010. However, the government said it would be premature to consider lifting the sanctions, known as the May 24th measures. On Tuesday, the National Assembly will resume the interpellation session with a focus on the economy. The nation's biggest personal data leak last month and the government's follow-up measures are expected to dominate the discussions. Kim Hyun-ji, ARIRANG News.
And staying at the deeply divided National Assembly, there are looming concerns that the ongoing extraordinary parliamentary session may be disrupted and even paralyzed, with the 2 main political parties showing a lack of progress in finding a middle ground on a range of political issues. The one being the court's acquittal of former Seoul Police Chief Kim Yong-pan on charges of hampering a police probe into allegations that the spy agency had meddled in the presidential election. Now, for more on the bitter political confrontation, we go one-on-one with Dr. Hong Sung-pil, professor of law at Yonsei University. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, all right.
Professor Hong, so it seems the spy agency scandal is back to haunt the party politics once again. Can you elaborate on other points of contentions that are hindering legislative activities?
Well, I think it's just as usual. The majority party tries to show the stability and its capacity to develop this country in economic sense. And while the the opposition party tries to be more like a people front, and it also wants to show the change. So I think the opposition party gives focus more on the welfare and giving compensation to the people who suffered from the massive leakage of information. And there are many policy issues, that basic pensions or compensation for massive information leakage and reform of local elections. And for the leading party, I mean, the privatization of medical services or capital market reforms, sort of economic issues, they really want those issues to be on the front line of the political battle, while the opposition party wants to have more people agenda on the table. But as you just said, I mean, the spy scandal is now back to haunt the whole scene.
Right. So with the two sides showing lack of sign and of realizing a compromise, will we see a repeat of what we saw back in 2013, a year that's considered one of the worst when it comes to parliamentary proceedings? Well,
my simple personal answer to that question would be not as exactly as that, or not as bad as the past, because now the Tongsin-dang and lawmaker Lee Seok-gi incident is now back in the sense a little bit. So, which means that ideological conflict is now behind, and now more political policy debates are on the front. And also the opposition party and also the main leading party, they also suffer a lot of intra-party problems as well. And then the coming local elections and by-elections should be serve as a sort of standard or setter for to what direction those two political parties should move. So I think, and in general, the people in this country have been already so much exposed to all the political battles. And then so people are waiting for now answers and actions rather than just talks and fights.
Of course, the two parties are aware that the June local elections might do that. If they continue to lock horns and try to disrupt this parliamentary proceedings, they're of course facing a tough and stern judgment from the public or the voters.
Exactly.
So how can the two sides avoid such a consequence?
Well, good signs and bad omens as well. Good signs. These two parties, political parties, opposition and leading parties, their policies resemble each other these days. And then it said, for example, the opposition party tries to, make the passage of North Korean Human Rights Act bill, and also the Feburary party tried to forge the resignation of the recent Minister of Oceans and Fisheries, and because they wanted to show good things to the people, and they wanted to respond properly to the wishes and to the emotional, strengths of the people in this country. So the good thing is now they are really, because of the coming election, and also they feel more responsible for what they have to do as political leaders. Now they show more sort of sensitivity to the people's wish. But the best strategy for them would be to put the matters behind and put the battles behind as much as possible, or at least they have to postpone and all the worthless political battles, and that they have to come.
Until the election is over?
Well, before the election. So those things would be the best strategies for their political battles.
And get back to their battles once it's over?
Well, we'll see.
I see. Well, with independent lawmaker Ahn Cheol-soo set to soon launch his new party, and which already enjoys a higher approval rating compared to the Democratic Party, will this turn out to be a tough three-horse race? What do you expect from this upcoming elections?
And as we all know, there are confusing and conflicting expectations about how people will take and respond to this Ahn Cheol-soo's alleged new political party. And there's another recent survey that shows that the opposition party gets higher support when we delete the name of Mr. Ahn Cheol-soo from the new party. And but definitely Ahn Cheol-soo is an eminent political figure, and he will certainly play a role in the local elections. And there are many signs that many famous or renowned political leaders have shown their intentions to join in case they do not see better positions to take. I think it depends on how he will eventually present his freshness as a politician, and also how he can show reliability and credibility as a political leader. And he has to show this time that he's determined to run for the presidency in the next coming presidential election. In that case, people will take him as a political leader in this country. And that will, I think, determine definitely part of the outcome of the local elections.
Hopefully we'll see some sign there. Thank you very much, Professor Hong, for joining us this
pleasure.
evening.
Thank you.
Very visit.
Touch base with journalists, experts, and analysts who are taking the pulse of Asia's heartbeat.
South Korea's defense minister.
In a lively half hour, join ARIRANG's Yoo Ji-hye for the day's top stories, current affairs, business, technology trends, plus global weather forecasts and more. ARIRANG News. Every weeknight, live on ARIRANG TV.
It seems President Park Geun-hye is determined to push ahead with her plans to reform the public enterprises that have been under fire for heavy debt and lax management. She warned that any labor attempts to derail her drive to revamp the sector won't be tolerated. Our Park Ji-won reports.
During a meeting of the president's senior secretaries Monday morning, President Park criticized state-owned companies for their lax management and called for reform. She pointed out that a number of public enterprises that are deeply in debt still offer their employees excessive benefits, even covering the tuition at foreign universities for some of their employees' children. She pledged to hold responsible anyone who tries to sabotage the reforms and said she is particularly concerned about recent opposition by unionists at some of the firms. She said the public companies need to regain the public trust by being proactive with their reform plans.
국민들은 어려움에 허리띠를 졸라매는데 공공부문에서 방만 경영을 유지하려고 저항한다면 국민들에게 그 실태를 철저히 밝혀야 합니다. 국민들에게 실상을 정확하게 알리고 공공기관 스스로 변화의 길을 갈 수 있도록 해야 할 것입니다.
President Park also criticized the lack of progress around her ambitious initiative dubbed Government 3.0, which aims to allow for wider public access to government information to ensure that state affairs are more transparent. She said the information is not being shared systematically and ordered fundamental improvements to her plan. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Tougher penalties will be imposed on companies found leaking client data or using it to advance their business. This is the latest measure in the government's response to the largest ever personal information breach that still has many rattled. Yoo Ji-yeon has the details.
The ruling Saenuri Party and government financial agencies have unveiled a proposal for a set of preventive measures against future data leaks. This as the nation continues to cope with the fallout from the massive leak of personal information from the country's 3 major credit card companies last month. The proposed plan strengthens the penalties on financial institutions found guilty of leaking or illegally distributing client information to third parties. Under the plan, those found guilty of leaking information would face up to 10 years in prison or a fine of $470,000. That's 3 years longer and 10 times the amount of the current penalties. In addition, those found guilty of using client data to enhance their business activities would be forced to pay a fine that's equivalent to up to 1% of their net sales. Going forward, financial companies and institutions would be required to delete client data within 5 years of a client's last transaction. The proposal must now go through the National Assembly, but if passed, will be implemented in the second half of the year. Last month's information leak was the third largest in global history, with 104 million people affected. The leak prompted more than 2.5 million people to cancel cards or have them reissued. Yoo Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
National tax revenue collected by the government last year fell short of expectations by 4% amid a prolonged economic slump. On Monday, the Ministry of Strategy and Finance said that amounts to a tax shortfall of nearly $8 billion in 2013, with total taxes collected standing at about $190 billion. The ministry attributed the drop to the sluggish economy and stagnant property market. And we are seeing signs that Korea's IT industry is off to a good start this year. The nation's exports in the information and communications sector rose last month on the back of rising demand for local semiconductors and mobile phones. ARIRANG's Hwang Ji-hye has more.
Korea's exports of IT products, which include semiconductors and mobile phones, inched up 0.2% last month from the same period a year earlier to $13.1 billion. The Trade Ministry said Monday that the rise in outbound shipments of IT products came in spite of a weak Japanese yen and financial instability in emerging economies. The Trade Ministry attributed the rise to growing shipments to ASEAN member countries and the European Union. Shipments of mobile phones in particular surged over 14% last month from the previous year to $2.1 billion. A more than 20% spike in exports of smartphones led the rise. Exports of semiconductors also rose about 15% to more than $4.5 billion. Shipments of display panels, however, fell more than 15% to $2.2 billion as exports to Korea's largest importer, China, plunged. Korea's imports of IT products, meanwhile, dropped 2.7% to $6.8 billion, spurring a 3.4% gain in the nation's trade surplus. The Trade Ministry expects the upward trend in IT exports to continue due to the economic recovery in Korea's major exporting markets like the United States and the European Union, along with the growing demand of smart gadgets in emerging economies. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
The 2014 Winter Olympic Games have barely begun in Sochi, but we've already seen some new rising stars emerge and even some new Olympic sports. For more on the Sochi 2014, we connect live to our Olympics correspondent Song Ji-san, who's been following the Games and is standing by at the news center. Now, Ji-san, what's the latest coming out of Sochi?
Good evening, Ji-hye. Monday is day 4 of the Sochi Games, and a semi-final for men's 1500-meter short track speed skating is now taking place as we speak. And among the 3 Korean skaters, Lee Han-bi made to the final after Shin Da-hoon blocked his way after falling down in heat 2, and naturalized Russian skater Victor An, or An Hyun-soo in Korean, who is a triple gold medalist at Torino 2006, also advanced to the final round. The final is scheduled to start after 9 p.m. Korea time. And staying on the ice, the host nation Russia won the first gold medal in team figure skating on Sunday, beating out Team Canada and Team USA. Russia's 15-year-old skater Yulia Lipnitskaya helped her team win the event first introduced in Sochi, earning a total of 214 points after free skating on Sunday with a clean performance. The young Russian has risen as a medal favorite alongside Korea's reigning Olympic champion Kim Yeon-ah. And while it's Sochi's turn in the Olympic spotlight right now, it's not too early to begin thinking about the Pyeongchang Winter Games that will be held here in Korea's Alpine City 4 years from now. And if you're in Sochi for the Olympics, do pay a visit to Pyeongchang House at the Olympic Park to get a preview of what it will be like in 2018. To mark the 4-year countdown, Pyeongchang's organizing committee held Pyeongchang Day on Sunday, with IOC President Thomas Bach present at the scene, dancing to Psy's Gangneung style. We'll also be on the site at Pyeongchang House next week for a closer look. And let's now take a look at the medal standings as of this Monday evening. Norway is at the top of the list with 7 medals overall, and the Netherlands are in the second with 4 medals, 3 of which came in men's 5,000-meter speed skating. Team USA stands in 3rd place, while host nation Russia and Canada are tied for 4th place with a gold, 2 silvers, and a bronze respectively. And as for Team Korea, we're still waiting on the country's first medalist from Sochi, but we're hoping that may change tonight. And moving on to some more of tonight's events in the lineup. Yes, Korea is now sitting 0 at the medal count, but speed skater Mo Tae-ba may change that as he returns to defend his title at the Adler Arena Skating Center in the 500 meter. He is the current number 1 in the World Cup rankings for the 500 meters, and he finished first in last year's single distance championships held at the same venue. While Mo Tae-ba will be skating for history once again, we also have the men's freestyle skiing mogul qualification round later in this evening, where Korea's Choi Jae-woo, who is the last year's Rookie of the Year, will be competing for a place on the podium. Well, that's all for now, and I'll be back with more updates on Primetime News. See you then.
Let's go over to our Kim Bo-gyung once again at the Weather Center for an update. Now, Bo-gyung, we know the East Coast is dealing with record amounts of snow. How about other regions?
Well, Tia, it was another mild winter day here in Seoul. In fact, daytime highs reached 3 degrees, making it feel more like early spring. Now, the snow in the East Coast regions will gradually stop by tomorrow afternoon, and elsewhere in the country, we'll get to see clear skies with daytime highs reaching between 0 and 6 degrees. Taking a look at tomorrow's readings, Seoul starts off the day at -6 degrees with a high of 4. Meanwhile, Gwangju and Busan hit 6 and 5 degrees respectively. Moving on to other regions, Jeju hits 6 degrees. Meanwhile, Mount Kumgang makes it to -10. Well, that's all for now, but I'll be back with more updates after 10.
And that's all the news we are following at this hour. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul. Thanks for watching.